Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. This is Think Tank. We are honored to be once again joined by Dr. John Johnson, who's Assistant Professor of History at St. Peter's University. Good to see you, Doctor.
Nice to meet you.
You spent a fair amount of time thinking about, writing about, researching, and a book coming up dealing with racism, particularly in the city of Newark, New Jersey. But the larger question of, dare I say, white supremacy. How bad is the problem in our nation, and are we dealing with it directly enough?
In recent years, it has escalated significantly. It's safe to say that, I'll just say it, I'll put it out there, the current administration in a lot of ways has...
The Trump administration.
The Trump administration has fomented and really used a lot of these long-standing racialist ideas that have been around for a while, but have really been the centerpiece of their administration. It didn't necessarily begin with Trump. I mean, these ideas have been around for a very long time.
What are they?
I mean, if we can just step back real quick and I think just define what white supremacy is, I think that's a great place to start. It is the ideas, the beliefs, but also the policies and the procedures that are reflective of and reinforce ideas that suggest that non-white people are inferior to white people. Whether we're talking about Jim Crow segregation in the South, we're talking about the institution of slavery, whether we're talking about the border policies of using camps or prisons to keep people who are seeking freedom, fleeing for their lives and seeking freedom and safety in the United States.
People coming from certain kind of countries, S-hole countries. Was that racist at the core?
I think it's important to note that when we talk about those folks and where they're coming from, these S-hole countries, let's look at, say, parts of Central America. A number of these people, the estimates, I believe, are 85 to 90% of them are Catholic. Yet we don't think about them as Christians who are fleeing to seek freedom in the United States. We call them, or we refer to them in any number of ways except for their identity that, as people in the United States, we often hold Christianity in high regard, right? As a matter of fact, we believe in religious freedoms. We support Christian peoples in their efforts to seek freedom and to practice their religion. Yet and still you have these people that are coming to the country who are dealing with trying circumstances, folks from El Salvador, Mexico, all these countries in Central America who are seeking freedoms and being denied because of their race.
But because of the race, respectfully, help me understand this. Do you separate the complex issues of immigration from the historical American history of racism, including slavery, Jim Crow, the inability to vote legally in this country, segregation, et cetera, et cetera? Do you separate the two? Because they sound like two different issues.
I want to separate the two. They emerge from similar, they emerge from the same beginnings. I mean, we have to go back to look at the early part of the modern era when European nations began to explore parts of the Americas, parts of Africa, and parts of Asia. And as these Portuguese, the Spanish began to encounter these people that were very much different from them. They weren't Christian. Some of them weren't, to be sure. I mean, in Africa, there were various religious practices, including Islam and Christianity. But when they got to the Americas, they encountered people that are very much different from them. Different in skin tone, different in religion, different in language. And from that, a system of beliefs began to emerge. Part of that was also used to justify exploiting the resources in the Americas.
Okay, respectfully, here's my challenge here. The history matters. But for a lot of folks watching right now, I can tell you what I think many are thinking.
What's that?
What does that have to do with today?
Oh, it has everything to do with
today.
Well,
then bring it clear to us right now, this administration, this country, our country, at this time, as it relates to racism and white supremacy. That history matters. And your book, I'm sure, will break it down in more detail when it's published. Bring it up to date.
Well, when we look at white supremacy, I think it's used as a means of obscuring the truth. I would even call it a Ponzi scheme, in that people tend to believe that whiteness will provide them any number of benefits, and to a certain extent it does, right? They may get hired for a job over somebody who is not white. They may actually get access to a suburban community with better amenities than an urban community. But in the long run, it's not about their productivity as much as those that are controlling the levers of power. It's for them to maintain power. White supremacy is a means of causing division. Again, if you look at the history of the United States, when we begin to see racialized differences is when slavery becomes a highly profitable institution. And that's when we begin to see the creation of laws that begin to separate white from black. The freedoms of African Americans, for the most part, was similar to indentured servants in the 1600s. Black individuals could own property. In some cases, they could own slaves. But laws were created to sow division and to shrink the freedoms of African Americans.
But respectfully, again, you got to, for our audience, the history matters. But there are some who are thinking Barack Obama was president of the United States. How much difference does that make in the context of the issues you are raising around white supremacy and racism, institutionalized?
Well, I think what ends up happening is that institutional racism is highly profitable.
Even today?
Even today.
How so? One example.
We look at as much as the United States is moving towards reforming the criminal justice system, we see federal contracts going to build these camps at the border. White supremacy is very profitable in the sense that it allows for, say, policies that help funnel money to the wealthy at the expense of things that can benefit the larger masses of American people. I mean, if you think about the debates that we have around Social Security and health care, we often think about them and it's framed as something that is given to, these are free things given to people that don't necessarily deserve them. But if you go to Appalachia, if you go to, say, Salem County, if you go to certain parts of Western New Jersey where white folks are struggling just as much as black folks,
that's right.
These are things that everyone could benefit from. Yet, we always come back around, I mean, not to say we, those that in power always come back around to, well, we have to keep these people from taking things from us. I mean, most recently, was it yesterday?
As we do this program, go ahead.
Yeah, the Trump administration just instituted policies that essentially don't allow immigrants to get federal benefits that could help them become better, more productive citizens. Underlying that is this idea that those people don't deserve those benefits.
One action that we need to take that will help us move in the right direction is?
I think we have to have more conversations like this, and if we, say, have conversations around white supremacy and racism, the conversation just can't end there. We have to continue to explore our mutual obligations to one another. The university that I teach at, it's founded on Jesuit principles, and it's the idea of one finding God in everything and caring for the entire person. And despite all of the differences that are very much put in the forefront, you know, when we address issues of white supremacy, we have to talk about the ways in which people are marginalized and oppressed. At the same time, we have to begin to recognize the commonalities that we all share. I mean, it's one of the more interesting things.
Few seconds, go ahead.
And it's amazing that African Americans, as much as we've been marginalized and oppressed in this country, we've also created the culture that not only people in the United States, but people the world over have embraced. If anything, we've created the soundtrack to this country, rock and roll, that all peoples can embrace. And what's interesting is that white artists constantly or fairly consistently give credit to those blues artists that created music that was steeped, that came out of our oppression. We've been able to find joy in those things that have oppressed us.
Professor John Johnson, Assistant Professor of History at St. Peter's University, one of the many institutions of higher learning we partner with. Next time you come back, let's talk about how divided we are in terms of race and some of the things we need to do to improve race relations in the nation. Thank you for joining us on Think Tank.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Adubato. We'll be right back.
Think Tank with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by MD Advantage Insurance Company, NJM Insurance Group, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, New Jersey Sharing Network, the Turrell Fund, supporting Right from the Start NJ, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Gibbons PC, Wells Fargo, and by Fedway Associates, Inc. Promotional support provided by Meadowlands Chamber and by NJ Biz. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.